is theater? It can be a lot of things, but the requirement that it has, there has to be at least one performer and at least one audience member. Otherwise, if you're just, monologuing to yourself in the bathroom in the mirror, that's not theater. There's no audience there. Or if there's just an audience but there's no one performing, that's not theater. But this is theater, right? I'm in front of you. You are a live audience. I'm a live person speaking. So that makes this theater. So now that we know what theater is, what is the difference between theater and film or TV? There are lots of them. So any thoughts from you guys? Let's make a list. Yeah.
Film is the same thing every time you watch it. Theater, there's going to be subtle differences or potentially major differences every time it's produced.
Yeah, so film, every single time you watch a film, it's going to be exactly the same. That's why we watch some of our favorite films over and over again, right? It's predictable. We know what to expect. With theater, every single time you go, even if it's the same exact show, it's going to be subtly different each night. Or you can go see it with a different cast, and it's going to be very different that night. What are some other differences between film and TV, or film and theater? Yeah?
Theater has a live audience, and film doesn't.
So film, does not have a live audience there. It's being made for an audience to be later. Theater, the audience is there right then and there. How do we think that affects the show that's going on, having a live audience versus not having one? Yeah?
The performers can draw energy from the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you're just acting for a camera, it's kind of like a dead space that you're acting for, right? Maybe you can have that energy with your partner, your scene partner, but you're losing that audience participation bit. Even if the audience isn't participating in theater, the actors can feel the energy. They feed off of it, the energy of the audience. And in turn, the audience feeds off of the energy of the actors. That's that live presence component, right? That makes theater kind of what it is. You do not get that from film. Film, if you mess up a shot, mess up a take, just do it again. Take 2, take 3, as many as you need until you get it just perfect. Theater, you rehearse it, but once you're on stage in front of those people, if you mess up, you mess up. Another great part about that is that means that it is immediate, right? Anything can happen. That's part of that excitement of being in the audience, is that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know if they mess up somehow, how are they going to get out of it? Right? How are they going to do this next stunt that I know that they've got to do? And that doesn't exist in film. Any other ideas?
More special effects in film.
Totally. Yeah, we can do special effects to an extent in theater. We've got fog machines. We can do sound effects. We can do illusions, right? But we can't do CGI and those kinds of things that they do in film. So we have to rely more on our audience's imagination to fill in the gaps instead of presenting everything to them exactly the way that we want them to see it. So now we're going to talk about willing suspension of disbelief. It's related to that. Does anybody know what this term means? It's used a lot. Okay, yeah, how about you?
It's when the audience gives up the fact that they know that it's not actually happening in real life, or the show, like maybe part of the set design is not actually there, but they just give it up for the sake of the show, pretty much, in enjoyment.
Yeah, you give up on that. So this is a term we use in literature, in TV, and in all forms of art, really. So let's break it down. If we say willing, right, what does willing mean? Yeah, it's a choice. It's voluntary, right? We are choosing to do this. Suspension. What's the word suspension mean?
Temporarily removing something.
Yeah, temporarily removing something. Great. And then disbelief. You know what belief is? What's disbelief? Not believing. So there's like a lot of double negatives in here, right? So you are willing yourself, voluntarily, temporarily letting go of the things that you believe, or the things that you don't believe. Right? So this is basically, right, this isn't real, that's okay. We know that this isn't real. This term was created by Samuel Coleridge in 1817, along with William Wordsworth, some great romantic poets and authors. So the definition from Wikipedia is the intentional avoidance of critical thinking or logic in examining something unreal or impossible in reality in order to believe for the sake of enjoyment. Again, just enjoy the play. letting go of the fact that this cannot happen. We have to really, really rely on that in theater, more so than in movies or television, right? When we're seeing something live, we don't have those special effects to make it fully developed, right? We have to fill in those little gaps. Similar to the article that you guys read for homework, right? We have to use our imagination and let go of the fact that we know that this isn't possible, that this isn't real, that these actors aren't really those people, that this set is just a set. We choose to let go of it. In the article that you read, the intro, right, it talked about this play, The Dark Side of the Moon, where we have this little hole that's like a laundry machine, right? But he uses it throughout the play. It becomes a fishbowl. It becomes a hole for an astronaut to come through. All kinds of things. And so we, as an audience member, choose to go along with this. And that's the great thing. We don't do that with any other medium. We are watching and we see how it works. Or sometimes we don't see how it works, but we can observe kind of the mechanics of it happening right in front of our eyes, and yet we choose to let go of those and choose to be a part of it. One of my favorite shows that I've ever seen was Woman in Black in the West End in England. I've never been into watching ghost stories or horror films, but this was a completely different experience because you are surrounded, right? You feel like the presence of this ghost is actually there. There's no separation of that screen world from the world that we're in. We were living in the world of the play. At one point, the entire theater, first the stage filled with smoke, and then the entire theater filled with haze so that I couldn't see the people next to me. So I didn't know in that moment if that ghost was real and really gonna pop up next to me and kill me next, right? I chose to, in that moment, I was so deeply entrenched in this story and allowing myself to go there that I truly thought that I could be the next victim of this ghost. My best friend was sitting next to me. We got out of the theater, and her arms were bloody from like hugging herself so hard that her fingernails dug into her arms. We had that suspended our belief that much that we were so into it. So what are some other ways that we see in theater that we're so present, so believable, that we just let this magical world overtake us? How about Peter Pan? In order for there to be a true willing suspension of disbelief, we have to, as playwrights, as actors, as creatives, create a world that the audience can believe in, can fully commit to. Without that, they're not willing to disbelieve it, right? So that's my favorite part of being in theater, is creating a world. So in Peter Pan, we've created a world where magic is real and pixie dust really does make people fly. And because they set up the events for this to happen, right? All of the ways in this story are so real to us that we believe when they start to fly because they've already set that up for us. And with this, we can see their wires, right? As audience members, we know that they're not really flying. But because the story is so real to us, we choose to believe it. In Warhorse, we can see that there are always 3 puppeteers per horse maneuvering this horse. But we're so into the story for the sake of our own enjoyment that we choose to let go of the fact and we believe that this is a real horse moving on stage, that someone can ride, someone can interact with. But we see everything that's going on. There's nothing hidden from us. Avenue Q, it's a musical that uses puppets, similar to Sesame Street, but they're right there with the characters, right? They're talking, they're walking. Well, we still choose to believe that it's these 2 characters interacting and not these 2. Both are happening because the people are taking on the characteristics of the puppets, but we choose not to see them and believe in the story of the puppets that's happening. Hamilton. We're all familiar with this. We know who our founding fathers are. We've seen their pictures on dollar bills and on monuments, right? They don't look like these guys. But they chose on purpose to choose men of color to represent our founding fathers for this show. There's all kinds of reasons behind it, right? That our country was built on people of color, that we were standing on their backs while we were creating this country and our democracy. But for the time that you're sitting in that audience watching the play, this is Alexander Hamilton, even though we know that he does not look like that. So that's the transformative power of theater. These other things are cool to watch, they're fun, they're enjoyable, but theater has a way that it can cross boundaries that film and TV doesn't do. because of that willing suspension of disbelief aspect. Film is afraid that if they go too far, you're not going to be into it. You're not going to believe it anymore. So with the theater, we take those risks and we take those steps to make choices and to make points, right? To get across our stories that we think are important. Like with choosing people of color to represent our founding fathers. Also in Hamilton, the chorus is made up of men and women, but they interchange roles. So about half of these people are females, but we choose to go with, for the sake of the story that's being told, that in this moment they are male soldiers in the Revolutionary War. Again, so we can fight for equity and diversity in theater in ways that film and television and other media aren't doing. This is Once on This Island. The play was originally written about 4 gods. The god of death and the goddess of earth are 2 of those. When people auditioned, they found out that the best person for the goddess of earth was actually a male. He could hit all the notes. He sounded fantastic. He got the part. The best person for the god of earth, or for the god of death, was a woman. So you can gender bend. You can put people in the roles that they're truly the best at, that are best at creating this world and telling the story, right? How are we best going to tell the story that we want to tell? Spring Awakening, in the revival that they did, they had people that were disabled, they had people that were deaf in the cast, and people signed as they were singing, but we suspend our disbelief and we don't pay attention to, wait a minute, they wouldn't have been using American Sign Language in Germany at the turn of the century, right? We get involved in it. It's because of our presence there in the theater, in that moment, being immersed in the story that allows these things to happen and allows us to be a part of it. So this right here, it's a set, or it looks like a normal house, maybe of an old couple that's been collecting things for a really long time. Another example of willing suspension of disbelief. This looks totally real if we were to look at it up real close. Once we zoom out, we're in a theater, we realize. We can see the wings, we can see the curtains, we can see the beams of light. But in that moment, when we're fully present in the story, all we're seeing is those details. All we're seeing is the story that's set in front of us, and we're choosing to disbelieve the things that are surrounding us, like those lights and like those curtains. Catharsis. Originally talked about by Aristotle in the Poetics. So the Poetics was a work that, in part, was a critique of drama, of tragedy, and kind of set the rules for Greek tragedy. This is what tragedy should be, these are the rules that it should follow, this is kind of the formula that it needs to be in order to be tragedy. One of the things that he thought was necessary was this willing suspension of disbelief, although he didn't call it that, but also a sense of catharsis, that we need to live through the stories that we're seeing on stage and feel their own emotions in order to fully feel ours, and to live our lives through them so that we don't have to live our own lives. So what do I mean by that? So the definition, the purification and purgation of emotions, particularly pity and fear, especially in tragedy, through art or any extreme change in emotion that results in renewal and restoration. So being so fully immersed in a show that you live those lives and you can purge your own emotions by living their emotions. So he thought, in order for there to be a functioning democracy, that we should go to tragedy and see these people live out their lives, live out their terrible tales, and maybe die these horrible deaths. And we could feel the pity and the fear and the emotions of these characters by being in their presence. But because we felt that and we went through all of those emotions on our own, we wouldn't have to feel them for ourselves. That got it out of our system. There are scientific studies that show that when watching someone, so if you are asked to smell something bad, right? You smell it and you make a face, oh, that smells bad. Something in your brain, the wires, the parts that fire, right? They can scan it and see where your brain is reacting. You watch an actor pick up a cup and pretend and act like they just smelled something really bad. You as the observer of that actor, your brain fires in the same spot. So we are feeling empathy for the actors that are on stage. Not only believing in their worlds, but feeling empathy for their feelings. So his thought was, before they even knew about these brain scans, where our minds were firing in the same spots, he thought that through feeling someone else's emotions, that helps us cleanse and purge our own emotions. An example I have of this is why we need this. The other day, I'd been through a lot, I was overwhelmed, I was overstimulated, and I turned around and knocked over a can of Mountain Dew straight into my purse. It just went boop, right upside down. And I started bawling. I just burst into tears. It wasn't about the Mountain Dew. It was fine. I could clean everything that was in my purse. That wasn't a big deal. It was about everything else I had been going through, and I just needed to let it all out. Have you guys ever had that experience where just something, the littlest thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you just break down? And it's not about that thing. His idea was that by going to theater, we can release those emotions that we need to release. We can sit there and cry about what the characters are going through, and then we can get up, wipe our tears, and move on with our day. Now we've had that release, and we don't need it anymore. We've moved past it. And we don't have to worry about doing that again on our own, for our own reasons. That's still the reason why we go to things like horror movies, and or watch things. Does anybody purposefully look up on Facebook or YouTube videos of soldiers coming home to their families, or of dogs that are rescued, and they're so happy to see their rescuer, or these things like we'll watch these cute animal videos that are so touching, or of heroes, right? And that we start to cry, and you're like, why am I watching this thing that is making me cry? Some people more than others will cry. I'll cry at anything. So maybe not everybody has that experience. Or watch something that purposefully makes you scared. Why would you want to be scared? We're doing that for this sense of catharsis, to purge those emotions from our system so we don't have to feel them through ourselves. We can feel them through empathy for a different character. This is an example of the Oresteia done outdoors. And this is a classic Greek play, right, where a wife kills her husband. That's not something that we ever want to go through. It's not something that's common to our experience. But through watching someone else destroy someone that they're so angry at, right, we can maybe feel some sense of vengeance, some sense of righteousness from that. And that means that we don't have to go out and kill our husband, because she's doing it for us. She's killing her husband, and that's all we need. So in that sense, it restores democracy. It keeps kind of an equilibrium for society, and it's necessary for society to keep on a stable path. So again, with that willing suspension of disbelief that is only truly available in theater, because we can see the wires of Peter Pan, because we can see the people inside the horse or the people controlling the puppets, we still allow ourselves to go into that world and fully feel the feelings that those actors and those characters are feeling, to allow catharsis, and through our own presence, that is healing our souls. Great, thank you. That's why you should go see theater.